Okay, so I think we're on. So, good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Tristan Hall, who is an accredited exercise physiologist with over 15 years of experience, and he has dedicated his career to helping people use exercise as medicine. So, he's the one we want to ask questions about how exercise supports our arthritis, how it can help us manage chronic conditions, manage pain. So I have gone through a little bit of housekeeping for now. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Tristan Hall. Over to you.
Hi, how you going? Can everyone hear me? Fantastic. Yeah, so my name's Tristan Hall. I'm an accredited exercise physiologist based in Southeast Queensland in the Sunshine Coast. As Mary said, I've been working for about 15 years as an exercise physiologist, and I specialise, or the clinics I work in specialise in aged care, quite specifically, so senior health. I'm very lucky that I've actually worked with, well, I think it was Arthritis Queensland before Arthritis Movement, I believe. I used to work with them for the last 5 years or so, running a lot of classes. So there might actually be some people in the meeting today that I've spoken to previously, I've taken a class through. So just to sort of reiterate, as Mary said, what we're contemplating doing today is a little bit of like an engagement.
Oh, oh, sorry, Tristan. You've switched on mute.
Is that better?
Much better.
Yeah, cool, cool. So what we're going to try to do today is a little bit more of an engagement webinar. So I was watching this podcast a couple of weeks ago, and it said that our attention span on these sorts of things is only 18 minutes. So I don't think I can get all the information across to you guys in 18 minutes. I'll try. But instead of that, I thought I would divide it up into three 15-minute slots. So I'll do 15 minutes of having a chat, and then we'll put some questions to you guys, 15 minutes questions. 15 minutes, and then we'll have a big discussion at the end. So hopefully that engages a little bit like of you guys into the conversation. In relation to the questions, if it's okay, just as Mary said, I'd love if you guys could type them into the chat. And then hopefully what will happen is Mary will collate the information and probably try to ask the most common questions or the most common themes throughout. And then if that goes well, I'll try and use that to guide some of the information that I provide today. So some of the information that I provide as we're going might be different to what you see on the screen. So what I'll do first is I'll just get up my slides and we'll go from there. So just bear with me for a second. Is that working there?
Uh, no, not just yet.
That's okay. Try that again.
Hey,
They're good now?
we're looking good.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so I'll just run through the first few slides because I've already sort of introduced myself there. So today's focus is on movement as medicine. So throughout the course of today, I'll talk about how movement is the prescription that we use and how we use it. And like I said before, I'm going to really try and channel that discussion towards arthritis and chronic pain and those sorts of things. So I will definitely do some general things, and then I'll also jump across to that sort of arthritis-based movement and that sort of stuff. So before we get going, the first lot of questions I'd like to put to the group. So if you'd like to write these down or if you'd just like to keep them in your memory bank for the next 15 minutes, the 5 questions I'd like to pose to you are, why do you believe exercise is important? So full stop. So, well, do you think exercise is important? Probably first and foremost. And then why do you think it is important? What are some different types of exercise that you guys potentially perform or you know about? So that can be anything you like at all. Again, I'm trying to leave these quite open. When we're thinking about exercise and movement, how much do you think we should do? So how much do you think we should do to be healthy, or how much do you think we should do just for fun. What should we actually do? So like what certain things should we do? Should we do it daily? Should we go for a run? Should we go for a swim? And then the last one is just how often we should do it. So do you believe we should be exercising every day, or do you believe every second day, or once a week, or once a month, or once a quarter, or whatever the case may be? So if you could just sort of have a think about those questions, guys, and then just write those in our chat to Mary. And hopefully in about 15 minutes time or 13 minutes time, she'll be able to collate those together and give the feedback, and we can have a bit of an open discussion from that. So I think the best way to start today is to give a little bit of a background, maybe first on myself or what my profession is. And then we can have sort of like a discussion about the definitions of why movement is medicine and those sorts of things. So an exercise physiologist is very similar in some instances to a physiotherapist or a dietitian or an occupational therapist. So we do a 4-year degree at university. And the way we differ from those professions is we use exercise as our prescription or our intervention. So you might go and see a physio and get a massage. You might see a dietitian who gives you some diet advice, or you might see an OT who gives you some assistive device or some technology that you can use. When you would come and see us, we would help to treat those same conditions or issues or functional limitations, and we would use exercise as our prescription. So exercise can obviously be lots and lots of different things, and we'll go through that today, but a lot of exercise, a lot of education on exercise, and a lot of lifestyle modification. So the things that we commonly see on a daily basis would be cardiac, respiratory, metabolic, and neurological conditions, and then obviously mental health conditions as well. So some examples are someone might come see us who's had a heart attack or a stroke, or someone might see us when they've got some difficulty breathing with their lungs. So they might have COPD. People have diabetes come and see us quite often, Parkinson's disease, and then of course, in relation today, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, and osteoporosis are very big areas that we focus on. So that's more exercise for our physical or our biomechanical limitations. So you've probably heard me say already that exercise is prescription, or that's the way we do it. So we prescribe exercise as our intervention. So I suppose my first question to the general public today is to have an alternative look on medicine. So if you were to imagine a world where there was a medicine or there was a pill that had basically zero side effects, it's accessible to all people. So that means it's physically accessible to you. It's accessible to you in your home. It's accessible to you in relation to your levels of function, your disease, specificity, or anything like that. And also a medication that with really, 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 really high dosages, it has very, very little side effects. So if we were to think of a medication like that, it would probably be, jumping off the shelves. So fortunately, slash for unfortunately for me, the medicine or the pill that I'm talking about there is exercise. So exercise has all of those benefits. So it's shown to be beneficial for basically all scenarios and all situations for people. At a very, very, very small dosage of exercise, or a very small amount of exercise. And like I said before, it's very difficult to overdose with exercise and do excessive things. Now, don't get me wrong, there's absolutely scenarios where we can do that, but it's quite difficult to do, and it's very rare. So a little fun fact there is that they've shown that even 20 minutes of low intensity exercise, so what we call zone 2 exercise, can yield benefits for our physiological and our physical system. And that's 20 minutes per week as well. So if you're at the moment doing absolutely nothing, which is fine in itself, and you were to do 20 minutes of very low intensity exercise, we would notice that there would be benefits for your physiology and your biomechanical and cognitive function and those sorts of things. So throughout the course of today, I want you to think of exercise just like that, as a medicine or a pill. And it's something that we can prescribe, and in theory, we should be prescribing it a little bit more often. So throughout today, the topics that we'll cover are very, very simple, very quick. The background, which is movement as medicine, which is at the moment. I'll have a little chat to you about the boring stuff. So the boring stuff being the burden of sort of disease in Australia, or the statistics on what's happening. We'll then talk about the role of exercise in health overall, and then arthritis. Then we'll go into some individual exercise prescription for arthritis and chronic pain. We'll talk about types of exercise, how resistance and functional training can improve your life, quite specifically in relation to arthritis and different types of arthritis. And then, like I said, I'm going to get you guys to guide me through some case studies and practical scenarios. So I do have some case studies, as Mary said, that you guys have kind of been asking for that. And then I'll also let you, the feedback I get, guide those topics. And then the very last thing, just a quick, probably 5 minutes, will just be on how to access exercise physiology services in Australia. So just before we get onto the statistics, just a quick one here, and the way that we as exercise physiologists think of the pillars of health. So in order to have like maintain happiness, health, contentment levels throughout life, we like to think of four major pillars that contribute to that. And as you can see from my diagram, it's only three pillars, but all of those pillars are encapsulated in one. So we've got nutrition, so our diet, so what we eat and what we drink, of course. We've got sleep, which is a really important one there for our overall health and wellness. We've got movement, which we're going to discuss at length today. And then all of them are encapsulated in what we call environment. So that can be our physical and our social environment. So it can be, where we are. So if we live close to the beach, or if we live in a city, if we live close to access to a gym or to the ocean, to the pool. It can also be if you live in, a house with other people, all those sorts of things. And then our social environment we choose to be in. So who we choose to engage with and the people we talk to. So that's just as important as our physical environment. So like I said, when I think about health overall, they're the pillars that I will often refer to, and I might refer to them throughout the course of today. But again, the main thing is movement and exercise is our main things. Good, good, good. So why movement matters and why we refer to movement as medicine. So when we break down ourselves, I suppose, we talk about our domains of health and our domains of function. So we've got our physical function, so how we present, our physiological function. So I think of things that are internal to my body, like my heart and my lungs, our cognitive, so our decision making, pain management, which is going to be a huge topic of conversation for us today, being from this demographic, and then of course mental health. Now, that's not the only thing that our body is, but they're the main domains that we work on. And what we know is that movement can help in every single sort of facet of those domains. So exercise prescription in relation to physiological, if we do cardiovascular exercise or aerobic exercise, it will strengthen our heart, our lungs, and our metabolism. It can improve our cardiac function. It can help us with cardiac disease. It can improve our breathing capabilities, can help us manage our diabetes, and it also just help with our overall metabolic function. So that's really beneficial there. So even though that's not going to directly relate to our osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, rheumatoid arthritis, or fibromyalgia, so on and so forth, it's just going to make us overall fitter, and our metabolism and our function of our body is going to be a lot better. So we're going to be a lot healthier, so we can manage with those things, and we have a bigger capacity to live. Jumping onto the physical side of why movement matters. So I think most of you guys would understand this, but exercise is fantastic for our biomechanical part of our body. So improving joint stability, building muscles, tendons, ligaments, making us move better. Yeah, basically making us more of a robust human. One of the sayings that we say almost daily at work is motion is lotion. So we know that moving is going to help us kind of move better throughout the course of the day. So a little tidbit on that is, when we move a joint in our body, we encourage synovial fluid to get to the joint, and then it actually lubricates that joint a little bit better. So some of you guys might find that your knees are very stiff in the morning, just as an example. And then as you get going through the rest of the day, you find they start to move a lot better. So that's a really good example of motion is lotion. So starting to move the joint. Oh, and then go from there. And some other things, exercise will improve our balance and our coordination, which is going to lower injury risk. It'll improve our movement patterns and those sorts of things. So you can see already, even just touching on two components of domains of health, we've started to get some benefits from movement. So we can also find that we get a lot of benefits in our cognitive and pain management. So it enhances learning, memory, and problem solving, as of the study that I've just put there. It helps regulate our nervous system tone, so deal with things that pop up a lot better. There's lots of research to show that if we were to learn a task, so it might be juggling or learning Italian, like I'm trying to do, if we had to do a bout of exercise or movement before that cognitive task, it's shown that we'll actually keep those memories, those memories will go from short term to long term a lot quicker, and we have a lot better retention. And that's just from doing a little bit of exercise before we do that task. The next topic we'll talk about is pain management and exercise. And thank you. And then, so what we know is that exercise is a great modulator of pain. So we'll get to that a little bit further on, but pain is a symptom that's often presented with osteoarthritis or any other type of arthritis. So we know that exercise is fantastic for reducing pain and have an analgesic effect. And then the last sort of area is exercise prescription for mental health. So very good for emotional regulation. Now, quite specifically in Australia, it's actually used as a sort of first up prescription for people who present with depression or anxiety based symptoms. They normally tell them to go and do some exercise and structured exercise to help with that. And like I said, it can manage depression, anxiety, and stress, and it supports our resilience and mood. So you can start to see now why movement matters and why we use exercise as our prescription uh, in our sort of field. So the burden of arthritis or chronic disease in Australia, I'm not going to run through all of these statistics, not because they're boring, but just because they're a little bit repetitive. But the general gist we can get from that is that arthritis is very prevalent in Australia. It's quite debilitating for the individuals, but also the family and the caregivers around. And it's very costly. And it can be costly to the individual, and it can be costly to our economy, and it can be costly to our employers. So I think if you have a look there at the fourth statistic, it rises to, so arthritis prevalence rises to 50% over the age of 80, which is, yeah, obviously half the population, which is quite a lot. And you can see that 15% of Australians are diagnosed with arthritis or have been diagnosed with arthritis. So it's very common in Australia, quite specifically. And then what we also know is that, as I've been harping on already today, movement is very cost effective, and it's a very accessible intervention that we can use to assist with management of arthritis. It's supported by a plethora of research, guidelines, and policy, and those sorts of things. So from that slide, I just want you to gather that arthritis is very common in Australia, and it's quite prevalent. So jumping onto the exercise part of it, these guidelines here are from the Department of Health and Aging, I believe, and they're very similar to the World Health Organization guidelines as well. And I don't personally like these guidelines just because they're so wide and they're so general, and they don't really give the consumer or the person reading them a very good idea of what they need to do. But hopefully I'll do that today. 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity exercise a week, and 75 to 100 of vigorous. So again, we'll delve into that a little bit later, like intensity. Strength training twice a week, and for older adults, at least 30 minutes of moderate activity most days, plus some strength work. So again, those guidelines to me are helpful, but they're not probably helpful enough. So we kind of now know that arthritis and chronic disease in Australia is quite a big burden. We know the guidelines. So what's happening in Australia? So in Australia, 30% of adults are not meeting those guidelines, and 73% of adults, so in that sort of middle bracket there, are not meeting the strength guidelines. And as we get to the next demographic of over 65s, it increases again. So you can see that we do have good guidelines. We are aware that it's quite a burden, but we're not sort of hitting those activity guidelines there as a population. Good. So that is the sort of start of my presentation. Like I said, I hope that's a little bit of an introduction to myself, to exercise physiology, to movement as medicine, and also just a little bit on like the burden of chronic disease, arthritis throughout Australia. Some take homes from that are movement improves health and wellness across all age groups. So it can help on all age groups, and it can also help in all different domains. So like we said, physical, physiological, cognitive, and so on and so forth. Arthritis and musculoskeletal conditions are widespread. The guidelines are very clear, but most of us fall short. And that's a major opportunity to improve outcomes through movement. So that's the sort of the summary of that section. So I'm not sure if Mary's got any questions or any feedback from um, the audience at the moment before I get on to the next thing.
Oh, uh, okay, well, thank you for wrapping those guidelines up nice and concisely for everyone. We've had actually a lot of questions come through from the audience, which is great to see.
Yep.
Everyone's really engaged. And we've had some questions along the line in terms of frequency and intensity, particularly with strong interest in, how to balance activity with symptoms. So, for
Perfect.
example, one participant shared their experience with hip osteoarthritis and asked how
Mhm.
to actually judge the right amount of walking when stiffness and pain are present.
Yep. Cool, cool. Um, I must have done a bit of a good job here because that's literally what I've got in the next section. So I'm going to literally delve into prescription and those sorts of things here. But I'll start it with how I'm going to discuss that is that exercise prescription, and not just for osteoarthritis, should all be tailored and specific. So that's sort of why I was saying there, not that I'm not a huge fan of those guidelines. They're a very good starting point, don't get me wrong, but they're very wide. And if someone's struggling with hip osteoarthritis, they probably don't want to go and do 200 minutes of walking a week because that might exacerbate their symptoms. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they should do nothing as well. So that's sort of the next section we're going to talk about is how to achieve these goals, and talking about time and type and duration and how to monitor those things. So without not answering the question, I might sort of just do this section. And if I haven't addressed it by the end, maybe those people could put their hand up. But that works perfect. That's literally what we're going to discuss now. Are there any other questions on if people think exercise is beneficial or non-beneficial, or if they don't like it, or if they do like it, or anything like that?
More of in terms of the symptoms and, what can
Mhm.
we do to reduce pain and stiffness. So I can
Okay.
assume that the questions around how much we actually should be doing have been answered, but now I
Mhm.
feel like you're going to be answering a lot more questions about, arthritic type of pain that people
Okay.
get. So I'll let you take the floor.
Okay, cool. So I will discuss those things now. I'll try and change the slides a little bit, or sorry, the information from the slides, because I've been a little bit more generalized, but I'll try and be a little bit more specific as we go through, guys. So just bear with me. For the next section, so like I said, I'm trying to divide it up a little bit. You've sort of answered these questions already, which is fantastic. So for the next 15 minutes while I'm chatting about prescription and type and time and those sorts of things, if you guys could just present to Mary what are some common symptoms that you present with? So obviously at the moment it's pain and dysfunction. So common symptoms and presentations of scenarios, so different types. So some people might present with pain, some people might present with no pain, some people might present with, gait changes or things like that. So if you want to write a few of those down, I'll try and incorporate them into the case studies. Do you think exercise prescription will help them? Just as a general kind of tidbit, like, do you think exercise will help, or are you in the impression that exercise won't help that hip pain? Um, and how do you think exercise will help? So, do you think exercise, again, going back to that hip osteoarthritis, do you think exercise is just going to make you fitter so that you're healthier, or do you think exercise is truly going to help you with your hip? So have a think about those guys, if that's okay, and we'll flick those through over the next 10, 15 minutes. But hopefully, hopefully I answer a few of your questions in my next little part here. All right. All good with that, Mary?
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. All right, fantastic. So now we've sort of figured out what we need to do and why we need to do it. I suppose the next question is, how do we actually achieve it? So how are we going to put those guidelines into practice, and how are we going to put those guidelines into practice for our scenarios? Okay, so quite specifically with arthritis, with pain or fatigue, or it might not even be a medical limitation. It might be a physical limitation in the sense of that you have a very small home and you can't do the exercises. So how are we going to achieve these? So individual exercise prescription, or any prescription, I should say, is absolutely the key. So it has to be individualized to your scenario, to your limitations, and it obviously has to be individualized towards a goal you're trying to achieve. So if my goal is to walk down to the shops with my knee osteoarthritis and my shop is 1.2 kilometers away from my house, there's not a huge amount of use of me, you know, doing some bicep curls every third day. Obviously, it's good because it'll make me look lovely, but it's not really going to be specific to my task. And if you go back to that osteoarthritis thing, the hip one, like I said, the guidelines are saying you should do walking, but I would probably assume that a fair bit of walking makes that person quite painful in the hips. So we might change that prescription there. So we might try and make things, and the goal, I should say, would be to reduce pain. So we want to make the prescription specific to the goal and to the scenario. So I think that's, like I said before, I probably said this a few times, like those guidelines are a fantastic starting point, but they need to be specific to our goal. So if there's nothing else that you remember from today, anything at all, I always want you to remember, let's be smart and let's be fit. And they're the two principles that are really going to help us when it comes to exercise prescription and most prescription throughout today. So let's be smart and let's be fit. So let's be smart. There's a few ways that this people say that this works, but this is the way I do it. So S is for specificity, so making the goals very clear and specific to what you want to achieve. So like we said there, with my hip osteoarthritis person, they're wanting to manage pain. My person who has osteoporosis, they might want to improve their bone mineral density. And my person who has, let's just make it up, knee osteoarthritis, they have no pain, but they just want to stay functional. They want to keep walking and those things. So you got to make it specific. You have to make it measurable. So that's a really important part of when we're trying to figure out what exercise to do. So again, I'm probably going to reiterate a lot on this hip osteoarthritis just because we brought it up, but we need to be able to measure the successfulness of the exercise that we put in. So what we need to probably do there is that the person would have to keep a little pain diary and say to me, for the first week, I was at 6 out of 10 levels of pain for 70% of the day. And then over 4, 8, 12 weeks, we can continue to measure that and we can see if we're successful or not. And that also helps us with like the titration of our exercise. So it will basically tell us if we're successful or not, and then it will make us change if we need to do it. The next two, A and R, so achievable and realistic, sort of fall in together. So the goals have to be achievable and they have to be a realistic goal. So, I can't set myself a goal to hit a 30-meter free kick in the Premier League next week because it's not realistic and it's definitely not achievable. But, we need to make sure that you can. So, and that doesn't go just for the goals. At the end of it, it could be, like if you're having 9 out of 10 pain every day, and your goal is to have zero pain every single day, not trying to be rude to you, but that's probably an unrealistic goal in the short term. So you can kind of work towards those things because if we set ourselves up for failure, then we're going to get in a negative feedback loop and not feel great about how we're going. And then the last one is time bound. So you want to set a time frame for that achievement. That depends on a lot of things, of course. If it's a very small goal, it could be a short time frame. So if you've just had a knee replacement and you say, I want to get full knee extension within the next 6 weeks or the next 2 weeks even, that's an achievable goal. If it's for the person who's suffered with hip osteoarthritis for many, many years, we probably want to prolong our goal setting duration and we want to go from there. So that's our SMART principle. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Okay. So that's the first sort of thing I think about when I'm setting a goal. And that, I know this sounds very, very silly. That doesn't necessarily need to be exercise prescription. That can just be goal setting in its whole. So it could be around nutrition. It could be around physiotherapy. It could be around anything in particular that you want to do. Even I may be doing some renovations on your house if you want to do that. So you can apply that to many scenarios. And then when the fit principle comes in, that's a little bit more specific for exercise. And I believe this is the questions we've been asked today. So frequency, how often should I exercise? Intensity, how hard should I exercise? Time or duration, I like to call that, is how long per session and what type of exercise. And that's sort of where I suppose the confusion comes. So I'm going to quickly flick through this one here because we've spent a bit of time on it today. We know that exercise reduces joint pain, improves mobility, enhances quality of life. It should absolutely be a first-line therapy for us with arthritis, often ahead of medication and surgery. I do want to reiterate that I'm absolutely not sitting here saying that exercise will fix a hip replacement or exercise will help you with chronic fibromyalgia, or if you have extremely low bone mineral density, exercise is the only way to go if you've had a heart attack or a stroke. Okay. I think it should sit along it. I think it should be a first line therapy earlier, or it should be a preventative or a proactive thing. But I'm absolutely not sitting here saying don't get open heart surgery or don't get a hip replacement if it's been guided by your surgeon. But you should try and address maybe exercise as a intervention with that person. Okay, so yeah, don't leave today saying Tristan said I can out exercise a heart attack. That's not what I'm after. It improves outcomes in osteoporosis, chronic pain, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and many, many more conditions. So different types of exercises have different outcomes and are different prescriptions. So I'll try and divide them up into the different types of exercise. And just because of that feedback I've got, I'll try and um, have a little bit of specificity in, or give it like a bit more of a better example. So I've put mobility and flexibility together. So that's a type of exercise prescription. Most of us here will know that as stretching. So it's very gentle, it's low intensity, you don't really need any equipment. You're basically taking your joints and your muscles through their natural range of motion. You can do it actively and passively, so you can do it yourself, or you can use a band and push through there. The benefits of stretching, mobility, flexibility is it maintains joint lubrication. It reduces stiffness, or it's been shown to reduce stiffness. It makes us, this sounds very silly, it makes us feel nice. It gives us confidence. Generally speaking, stretching is known to sort of lower our nervous system tone, so make us feel better and more comfortable and those sorts of things. The beauty of mobility and flexibility, you can do it anywhere, you can do it really often. So frequency, we can do it as much as you like within reason because it's such low intensity. Now, I know there's probably some people in here who do Pilates and yoga and are yelling at me, Tristan, it's not low intensity. I know it can get to high intensity, but in the essence of mobility and flexibility is a true domain, very low, very easy. So for arthritis, osteoarthritis, quite particularly, it will be quite beneficial because it'll just help reduce stiffness in our joints, encourage range of motion, make us feel a little bit more comfortable in what we're doing. People with fibromyalgia, it's really going to help there. Not mechanically, it's not going to improve much, but it will probably make you feel a lot better and reduce tension in the muscles. Okay. So mobility and flexibility is very important. When we're prescribing that, like I said, we can do that every single day. There's no negatives to doing that. So aerobic exercise is probably our next big domain, and that can be divided up into lots and lots and lots of areas. We can have anaerobic exercise, aerobic exercise, we can have zone 2, we can have zone 5. So they're all different intensities. I'd like to think of aerobic exercise as a movement that the individual person is very comfortable doing, that has a very low risk associated with it. It is not strenuous on the body, and that we can do for a prolonged duration. So, walking, cycling, swimming, low impact aerobics. If you're a great swimmer, swimming would be aerobic exercise. If you're not a great swimmer, it's probably not aerobic exercise. It might be a bit more resistance. So something that's easy to perform, that you're comfortable with, that you can do for anywhere between, I suppose 0 minutes or 1 minute and, up to 90 minutes. The prescription of aerobic exercise, they say to do 150 minutes a week. I personally think if you can do 2 to 4 bouts of about 30 to 40 minutes throughout the course of the week, that will absolutely be enough. There's lots and lots and lots of research in the last probably 5 years that zone 2 exercise is very beneficial. So that, guys, is where we just do really low intensity exercise. So it's a percentage of our heart rate, but it's about 10 to 15 beats per minute above our resting. And we do that. And the way I prescribe it in our clinics is just the talk test. If we're walking, as per se, and you can talk to your friends or you can talk to your partner when you're walking, that's a good intensity. If you can't talk, you're working too hard. If you can sing, you're not working hard enough. Okay, so it's nice low intensity. So aerobic exercise, in my opinion, is the cornerstone of all health for people with arthritis, osteoporosis, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia. It's going to be beneficial. You're not going to have a primary benefit from it. You won't notice that tomorrow my arthritis is better, but it will make your joints move better, your heart function better, your lungs better with like our respiratory function, metabolic and our cognitive. So it sounds very silly. It will have lots and lots and lots of secondary benefits that will definitely benefit your situation, especially people with fibromyalgia or rheumatoid arthritis. It will just help you manage your fatigue a lot better. So the next area is, in essence, one type of exercise prescription, which is resistance exercise. But we've divided up into sort of a few areas. So resistance exercise is any time that you're using an external force or to the body to provide a stimulus. So it can be body weight exercises, so a push up, it can be a chin up, it can be using weights, it can be using a Pilates machine, it can be using bands, it can be using balls. So anything that's an external stimulus to the body that we're not just moving our body in space is the definition of resistance-based exercise. I often get told by some of my clients that I think it might have been in the 70s or 80s, there was a bodybuilder who became famous for what we call isometric contraction. So I think he used to like push his hands together and he was massive, and he said that that's the only exercise he did. So sounds silly, but that is actually a form of resistance exercise because you're pushing against yourself. It just happened that he was extremely muscly anyway, so that resistance was good. So resistance training can be anything in that, and that's probably where we're going to hang our hat for any of those sort of physical fatigue and pain-based symptoms for arthritis. That's where we're probably going to get the most benefit. So we're going to improve our joint stability. We're going to hopefully reduce pain. I'll talk about that a little bit later. It's going to improve our function. It's going to build our muscle mass, osteoporosis scenarios. It's going to improve our bone mineral density. It's basically going to build the structure that is your body and make it stronger. Okay, so quite specifically for osteoarthritis, it's going to build up joint integrity. So it's going to make our joints feel better, move better. The way I always think of our joints is that they're a bit of a hinge joint. So the muscles around them are the levers. So if we can build those muscles, tendons, ligaments up, we're going to basically move a lot better. So with resistance-based exercise, prescription shows that 2 to 3 times a week is ideal, and I tend to agree with that. 2 to 4 would be where I would leave it. I would probably not go too far above 4 for what we're trying to achieve for general resistance benefits. And I probably wouldn't go too far below 2 because it's probably not enough of a dosage to elicit a positive response. Just like we said before, well, actually, I haven't said yet, but we start light and we prioritize technique. So we start easy and we progressively get harder. So that's how, a very wide sort of definition of resistance-based exercise. So 2 to 3 times per week. Duration would be anywhere between 20 to probably 45 minutes. You don't have to do much more than that. The intensity is very much dependent on your goals and also your level of fitness, so where you are at the moment. So you're absolutely not going to start doing a CrossFit class. You'll probably start low intensity and build on from there. Just think with resistance-based exercise or exercise, you just want to give yourself enough of a stimulus or enough of a dosage that it elicits a response. So if you can do 10 of these in your daily life, if you do 10 tomorrow, you're probably not going to be providing enough of the stimulus to improve. So you might want to do 11, or you might want to add some more weight and do 8. So you want to make sure that you're just doing enough to elicit a response. So to jump onto the next one, which again falls within the same banner, is plyometric and power training. And the reason I included this today is because we're almost definitely going to have some people with osteoporosis, osteopenia in this group. And this is a very common prescription. So they say with the osteoporosis, we want to do resistance-based exercise that's impact loading that has some form of power or plyometric basis to it. And basically, in a very simple term, plyometric is jumping and power is when you're explosively doing something. So it might be throwing a medicine ball into the sky or slamming a ball into the ground, or it might be jumping from side to side for our plyometrics. So it's where we're doing the above exercise, so resistance exercise, but we're doing it rapidly. And the reason it's really good for osteoporosis is because we know it loads the bone and helps with bone remodeling, and it can actually increase our bone mineral density. And I've got a case study in a little bit that kind of alludes to those things. The last one I'll jump on is to balance and proprioception training. In my mind, that should be included in all of those things. When you're doing strength and walking and balance, sorry, not balance, stretching, balance will be included. So balance is an often looked area of prescription for people with quite specifically osteoarthritis, but it improves our confidence. It reduces our apprehension around falls or issues. It helps us know where our body is in space. It gives us confidence to move. And generally speaking, it helps with our movement patterns. So it's very, very important to include balance and proprioception training into our prescription model. So just the last sort of thing there. So resistance and functional training is a very big, um, it's not a fad because it's very important, but it's a fad industry at the moment when people say functional training. So we've just discussed how resistance training helps make our muscles strong, protects our joints, reduces pain, improve glucose control, so on and so forth. The functional part is in relation to the function that you want to do. And you can see here, I've put a little picture of a young fellow putting some groceries away. And that's what I refer to as functional training, because what it is it's about finding the task that you wish to do or the function, and you are going to mimic that. So in this instance, with this young man here, let's just put a scenario in place. He wasn't able to do that because he has shoulder osteoarthritis and is very stiff and very sore. And so what we could do for him is we could give him some resistance exercises that get his arm moving over his shoulder, and then we might, do some stretches to get him there. Then we might start to do some resistance exercises, and you can see that we've got the function. So it's functional for that task. So functional training can be putting your groceries away. It can be putting your shoe on, which is a task that I often get asked to help with. Getting off the ground is another really, really common one. But then it can also be something very different. Like my dad's 65, who's here, and his, goals are to continue to jog. And, for me, my goal would be to, I don't know, kick a conversion from 20 meters out. So it's all in relation to what you would like to achieve, and then you work backwards from that. And that's what functional training is. So if you're seeing that at gyms and things like that, just to give you a little bit of confidence. Cool. So in a nutshell, that's our second little area there. So hopefully, I have gone through and explained the different types of exercise. So we've got our flexibility or our stretching, our aerobic exercise, resistance exercise, balance and stability. I've explained how they can benefit us as a whole. I've explained how they can manage our pain and our symptoms, help with our activity daily livings or our function. Obviously, I discussed there how plyometrics and resistance training will improve bone mineral density, joint stability, and strength. Again, the principle I want you to take home from that, I know I said it just briefly before, is that when we're looking for exercise, what we want to do is we want to make sure it's tailored, specific to what we want to achieve. And then this sounds very silly, just like a medication. You want to take the minimum effective dose. So if you can't walk up 3 steps without getting short of breath, there's no use in setting yourself the goal of walking up 10 as your exercise. So what you probably going to do is you want to start with 2 steps and build up to 4 steps so you progress past your goal. So minimum effective dosage and progress it very slowly. And that's something that I want you to sort of take as a principle. So things you want to ask yourself when it comes to exercise, hopefully this has gone a bit full circle from the start of this 15 minutes. What do I want to achieve? What is my current baseline and where do I want to be? What is the minimum effective dosage of how I get there? So what can I do to get there? I want to make sure I surpass my current level. How can I progress towards my goal? And then obviously once you've got all that in place, you're going to build up little by little by little to get there. So that's the summary of this section. I'm going to chuck it over to Mary now, if that's okay.
Okay, so I can imagine that you've answered a lot of the questions that have actually come in. And before I do put a couple of questions to you,
Yep.
one person in particular has expressed some interest in concrete examples tailored to
Yep.
specific joints. So if you have
Yep.
one or two or three exercises specifically for areas like the hip, the knee, the shoulder, the hand, do you have
Okay.
anything you can demonstrate? Because I know it can be hard on camera as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay. What's the most common one there? So I might do this as my first case study instead of doing what I've written down. So like a hip, is that a good
Yeah,
example?
go for the hip. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when it comes to exercise prescriptions, so we spoke about before how there's different domains. So not to be rude, let's forget about the other ones. Let's forget about aerobic. Let's forget about stretching. Let's forget about plyometrics. What we want to do is we want to build strength. So quite specifically in our hip, we have a lot of structure around it, a lot of muscles that are going to support our hip and our pelvis. And obviously the hip joint is very affected by osteoarthritis, I believe, in this scenario. So when it's sitting in that ball and socket joint, it's probably a little bit rusty and it hurts a little bit. So sorry if that's you and I'm ripping on you there. So what we want to do is we want to build some strength around that joint. Now, I don't know your personal exercise levels for this individual, but what you want to do is you want to build up the muscles around the hip. Okay, so it can be very simple. And what I'll try and do is I will try to show you 3 different exercises. So I think you guys can see me. Is that a little? Yeah. Yeah, cool. So if you're just sitting on your chair, you can do something as simple as putting your hands on the outside of your knees and pushing into your hands. Can you see my legs?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, cool.
Oh,
So you're
no,
gonna
sorry, not your legs.
that's all right. All right, so you can just sit like so, hands on the outside of our knees, and we're going to push our knees outwards. Okay, so we're going to push my knees into my hands, and what that's going to do is it's going to isometrically contract the muscles on the outside of my hip. Okay, so like I said, that's a very low intensity exercise that someone can do to start. Now, I assume the person I'm talking to might be a little bit more advanced than that. So another more challenging exercise to build up hip stability is obviously a sit to stand. So it's predominantly knees, but it's going to help our hip as well. So you could do some sit to stands up and down. A really, really easy and smart exercise prescription for our hip is to do a single leg balance. So we spoke about balance before. So balancing on one leg, holding onto a wall, that is going to build up a lot of stability in our hip. Now, with that one there, the key that we've spoken about today is to start easy. So I might hold onto a wall and have perfect posture, and I'll do that for 10 seconds. And then in 4 weeks' time, I would like you to get to the point where you can hold that for 60 seconds, still with the wall there for safety, but not necessarily holding on to that. And what that's going to do is it's going to build up the muscles that surround our hip joint. It's going to be functional for walking, because when we walk, we balance on one leg, and it's going to give us pardon me, the stability to walk through there. So again, I know that's a very generic response, but I have absolutely no idea where this person sits with his injury. But exercise prescription. So start easy. What I did there was probably a great example of how you can start easy and progressively get more challenging. You can start with the pushes against your own hands, which is low intensity. You can do your sit to stands, which is what we'd probably say medium intensity. And then you can incorporate that balance, which is a balance and stability exercise. So again, don't take my word on it like gospel, but those 3 exercises should help. And it just shows a really good progression of resistance-based exercise. And the person's probably asking, well, how often would I do those? The
Mary, we
low,
can only see you.
oh no.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I wasn't doing too much anyway. I was just mucking around. So yeah, so those exercises there. So like a sit to stand, so a stand up, sit down, pushing against our knees. Sorry, our knees against our hands, and then balancing on one leg will probably be the 3 most important exercises there. How often is very dependent on the intensity of the exercise. So the one where you're pushing your knees into your hands, you could probably do that every day. You could do 3 rounds of 10 of those every day. No issues whatsoever. Sit to stands, quite difficult. So you might do that 2, maybe 3 times a week, like we discussed before. And then the balancing one, again, low intensity, but difficult to perform. You could probably do that every day as well. So again, I know that's quite a tidbit, like that's right, very specific for that person and very generalized answer. So I hope that potentially helps.
No, it definitely answers the question. I saw some people in the cameras following along and doing exactly as you were saying. So,
Oh, very good.
yeah, no, that
Actually,
was fantastic. I'll keep my camera off for now, just in case it
okay.
messes with anything. But that links in nicely with, the next couple of questions we have, because we're seeing a lot of people concerned about joint safety,
Yep,
particularly if they've already had significant joint damage and they
yep,
experience severe pain. So one person
yes.
asked how to tell if exercise could be causing further wear and tear on bone hip, and if it can lead to things like gait changes.
Mhm. Okay, you did ask this before. Sorry, I forgot to talk about it. So, because the main I don't want to generalize, main symptoms we have with osteoarthritis would be pain and fatigue and I suppose, dysfunction. Remember when I spoke about measuring our things. So a really good way of doing that for arthritis is to have maybe a little pain diary associated with your exercise. And we call it the 2-point pain scale at work. So let's just say that someone, is experienced 4 out of 10 levels of pain in their hip. And when they're doing exercise, that might go up to a 5. We never ever want to exceed 2 points above where we are. Okay. And we never want to be more than 2 points below 10. So we never want to be above 8 when we're exercising, like ever. And we never want to be like 0 out of 10 pain when we're sitting, and then randomly we're doing exercise and it's 5 out of 10 pain. Okay, it's too much of a difference because I know that the old mentality of no pain, no gain, that's rubbish. Don't listen to that. Okay, it should just be a little bit more challenging than what you're doing. So a pain scale is a really good way to determine if the intensity of the exercise is really good in relation to knowing if you're doing long-term damage. Look, there's some really, you could go get bone mineral density scans. You could obviously get your scans on your hip or your knee and things like that. But I would monitor symptoms and just think when we're doing resistance exercise, quite specifically in relation to joint, we're trying to build up muscles, tendons, and ligaments. That's our sort of main priority. So touch wood, within reason, they're not going to do you harm if you do too many of them. But if you're starting to feel your joint integrity become a little bit more worsened, then obviously you want to step back. But it goes back to that thing of small, kind of slow progression of exercise prescription, starting at a line where you were very happy with. Like if you have never done any exercise and you have knee osteoarthritis, you're not going to go and do lunges. You're going to start by doing some, seated exercises to sit to stands and so on and so forth. So I know this sounds like a little bit of a cross referral, but with all the arthritis movement classes, that's very much what they do, where they start with low intensity and then they give alternatives and they give progressions to each exercise. So it's a really good way of maybe, dipping your toe into the water, as per se. I forgot the rest of that question.
No, that was a fantastic overview because we've got a lot of people here sharing their experiences and
Mhm.
asking more specific questions in relation to their specific types of arthritis they live
Yep.
with. So what we might do is continue on with the presentation, and we're going
Okay.
to revisit some of those because I can imagine more and more of them are going to come up, especially as you delve into the case studies.
Okay, I'll try and knock this first case study out quickly because we don't have much time, number one, but number two is sort of touched on it. So osteoarthritis client, a bilateral knee OA who had a very, very active history. He came to us with his goals, and his goals were to reduce pain and increase activity. So his prescription, what we gave him, he was already doing a bit of walking. We gave him a resistance-based exercise that he did twice a week in the gym. And what we found from that was that he reduced his pain in his knees from our pain diary. He increased his activity from his activity log, and his function and improved. And the way we measured that is when he came in, he was unable to do a sit to stand without using his hands, and he was unable to stand on one leg for more than 6 seconds. Okay. So his prescription for his knee osteoarthritis started with some single leg balance, what we just did before. It started with some push outs against his knees, which we did before, some sit to stands again, which we did before, and some calf raises. And then over the course of about a 24-week cycle, which it changed throughout, those 4 exercises became a little more challenging. So by the end of it, he was able to do a squat, so holding onto a ball and doing a squat to the chair and back, so a progression from his sit to stand. He was able to do a single leg calf raise, so balancing on one leg, the first exercise, plus a calf raise, so 2 exercises together. And we had him doing what we call a crab walk, where he was walking side to side, which was the same as the exercise pushing our knees in there. So that's a really good example of we measured it. We made his goals, like we had his goals first. We measured where he was. We measured where he got to. We progressed his prescription, so it changed as he changed, as he improved. Like I said, he ticked a lot of boxes already, so we didn't touch that too much. And then we got the outcomes that we were looking for. So that's a really, really good example of how, like tailored and specific exercise prescription can help that individual. Now, that's a very lucky case because this person was quite healthy and he was very aware of it. The next case here is I see a lot at our clinic, and it's a osteoporosis, osteopenia case, so a bone mineral density case. The young lady came in, so 55, so quite young. Osteopenia, just prescribed by her GP. So she just got her bone mineral density scan. Sorry, I've got her bone mineral density. Her T score was here somewhere. Her goals were to increase her confidence, increase her bone mineral density if possible. And at that moment in time, she was doing absolutely no exercise prescription. She was very, very active about 3 or 4 years before. She was really, really, really worried about doing anything because of her falls risk. And obviously her fracture risk in relation to that because of that bone mineral density. So with this lady, a lot of the first few times we spoke to her was about education and talking to her, saying that her falls risk wasn't any higher than it was the year before. So she wasn't at any higher chance of having a fall, but there was obviously a higher risk of her fracturing something if she was to have a fall. So we sort of changed her mindset on that. We also spent a lot of time talking to her about how resistance exercise and plyometric exercise is very beneficial for bone mineral density. So we can actually increase our bone mineral density. We spoke about how exercise prescription can improve our muscles and our muscle mass and those sorts of things as well. So I'll just jump across. So I've got it on my TV, my computer here. So when she presented to us, she had a negative 1.6 T-score, which is just between sort of osteopenia and osteoporosis. So not osteoporosis yet. Like I said, she was very active previously, not at the moment. So after, where are we? Sorry. After 12 months, okay, so she got a scan at 6 months and then she got a scan at 12 months. She went back to her GP. She got another bone mineral density scan. So also this lady was on Prolia injections as well. And it was back to a negative 1.2, so a 0.4 improvement in a 12-month period. And if we kind of aim to do that again, she will actually be not classified as osteopenia in another year. Okay, so you can see there that the exercise prescriptions helped improve that bone mineral density for that lady. And again, like I said at the start, it was more about education and talking to her about how we can improve her confidence and those sorts of things. And then the last little case study here is a fibromyalgia. So 72-year-old lady presented with fibromyalgia, widespread pain, lots of issues with fatigue, lots of issues with sleep. And her goals were very simple for her. They were just to improve her energy and reduce pain and build confidence. And then over the course of our sort of 12 weeks together, we kept a very, very close diary on fatigue and pain. And that was how we monitored it. And that's how we measured what we were doing. And like our goals were specific to that. And for her, we just did gentle mobility. We did a little bit of hydrotherapy. So in the pool, we found that was beneficial for her. Low intensity stretching. We got her to do a little bit of walk. And then by the end of that 12 weeks, she had gone from not doing any intentional exercise activity to being able to do 2, maybe 3 bouts of 30-minute walking per week. Now, some weeks no, some weeks yes, but that's what we were talking about in relation to managing her symptoms. So for her, we would just follow how she's feeling and we would prescribe accordingly. And I wasn't sitting there on a Friday at the end of the week saying you didn't reach your guidelines this week. So for her, it was all based off those things. Because like I said right at the start of today, we know that something is better than nothing in that scenario. So even if she did nothing that week and did the 10-minute walk, I was still happy with that because I knew that next week we would be able to get back to it. So they're the 3 case studies I tried to choose. I know I'm rushing through them just because I'm wary of time. And I think that's basically like my presentation within reason. Mary, any questions on that sort of stuff?
Oh. And just having a read now, essentially just lots of people with this similar experiences who can resonate with some of those case studies. So that
Okay, that's
is
good.
really promising to see.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it might be good to actually explain to people how they could connect with an exercise physiologist, given how beneficial your role is and how integral it is for that long-term management of osteoarthritis, but also those other conditions like osteoporosis, fibromyalgia, and more.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. So obviously, hopefully, most guys here today have kind of understood the benefit of exercise prescription. And again, I apologize for rushing through at the end there. But in order to gain access to an exercise physiologist in Australia, we're very, very lucky. We do have lots of avenues to do it. So every individual in Australia through Medicare over the age of 65, or all individuals, but over the age of 65, you're applicable to see your GP for what they call an EPC, or an enhanced primary care referral. You can see a physio, an exercise physiologist, a dietitian, a podiatrist, a speech therapist, and a psychologist. You get up to 5 sessions per year funded. So if you go and chat to your GP about that, especially with osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, rheumatoid, any arthritis, because that's classified as one of our 6 chronic conditions in Australia, you will absolutely be able to receive a referral to an exercise physiologist of your choosing. It's actually changed about 2 months ago, so you can just get the referral and go and find whomever you want to deliver that service for you, which is actually kind of good. You get 5 of those a year, and you have to share them between professions, unfortunately. If you're in luck, you might actually find an exercise physiologist that bulk bills those services, but generally speaking, it will cover at least 2/3 of the bill. So GP led, go and get your EPC. If you happen to be have a gold or a white card through Department of Veterans Affairs, you can do that same referral pathway. Private health in Australia is now jumping on board. There's lots and lots and lots of rebates for EP, quite specifically for group classes. Like, they do give you quite a bit of money back for that. Cost-effective methods to see an exercise physiologist. If you're lucky enough to be close to a university that has EP, I would go in there. Most of the time they have student-led clinics where there's probably 10 students with a couple of supervisors. That's where I did all my prac when I was young, and I learned so much there. So that's a really good, cost-effective and accessible way to do it. Normally it's, a gold coin donation, or sometimes even free, which is great. NDIS is another avenue, but probably the biggest one for this demographic, and I don't mean to pigeonhole you guys at all, is the support at home or my aged care scheme. So that's for any individual over the age of 65 in Australia is eligible for that within reason. So if you have a home care package, or you have a community home support program, so CHSP, you are eligible to see an exercise physiologist through that, and they can come and see you individually. You can go see them in a group setting. You can see them in the pool. You can see them at home. You can see them at the gym, wherever you wish to go see them. So I would encourage you guys, if you do have support at home, I think it changes to that in November, My Aged Care, to contact your case manager, and they will be able to sort an exercise physiologist for you. And you can choose, just like the EPC one, you can choose whom you want to do it. So if you have someone you already see that you can ask your GP or your case manager for a referral, and you can go see them immediately. So we're very, very lucky in Australia. I'm in the UK at the moment, in Britain, and I've realised that Australia is very, very, very lucky with our access to exercise physiology and physiotherapy. So I'd encourage you guys to use it. So that's probably the best ways to access it. So final things from me today before we do our little questions is movement is medicine. Motion is lotion. Continue to move. It's going to help with all different domains of our health and our wellness. Be smart about your prescriptions. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Try and be fit. So frequency, intensity, time, and type. Those are the 2 big principles. And remember just to titrate or to prescribe accordingly. So start low, increase, and just make sure what you are doing is specific for what you are trying to achieve. Don't try and run a marathon if you just want to improve your shoulder mobility. It's not going to work. Cool. Any questions?
Excellent. I'm just having a look at the final comments coming through. People asking about the exercise classes that are held through our organization.
The most important one, exercise classes through Arthritis. I did write that there. I did write it there. I just forgot.
You're all good. But lots of positive kind of messages being reinforced, sharing how they understand motion is lotion, and the use it or lose it philosophy has really resonated with a lot of people. But we do see a lot of people have to run now. If you do have to run at this point in time, you will get a copy of this presentation. You will receive the recording, so you can go over any of the information Tristan has covered. I don't think there are actually any more questions that we have to unpack, but a lot of encouragement, a lot of appreciation for all the expertise you have shared with everyone. I think everyone's really grateful that you were able to nicely consolidate those guidelines and not just go over what type of exercises we need to be doing, but why we need to be doing, how to be doing them. And, the practical demonstrations really help. And it just really highlights how, there's so many benefits of exercise that it really does offer that long-term protection, not just for arthritis, but overall health and well-being. But I want to say a huge, huge thank you to you, Tristan, for sharing that information with us, making it such an engaging presentation for everyone. It was really comprehensive, but it did, bring all that theory to life. It showed us, how it can help people of all ages, all abilities, conditions. So it was really positive, and I think it was really well received. So thank
Oh,
you so
thanks.
much for sharing your expertise and experience with us today.
No worries. Thanks, God. And when you pass the presentation on, you can put my email address on that. So if anyone wants to email through any questions, I'll be happy to help.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tristan. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight and all the questions, all the stories. We love to hear from you guys. And yeah, any questions you have for Tristan, send them through.
Thank you.
Thank
No
you.
worries.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Great information.
No worries. Thanks for attending. See you guys. Thanks, Mary.
Take care. Bye.
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 Thank you.